Welcome to another brew day with G Brews. To start with, I'm actually going through and just cleaning out my brew pot. The Element had a whole bunch of crud on it. So I'm actually using some PBW in 3 gallons of water. I'm going to bring it up to 160 degrees and let it kind of soak in that for about 30 minutes and just really clean everything out, because I think I've done 5 batches. I actually did a batch yesterday, but I just felt like brewing and not recording, so I didn't get it, but I'll share some details with that when that comes up. One new thing that I'm trying out though is Brewfather. It's an app to help with brewing, and I used it for the first time yesterday. I brewed a New England IPA the recipe I found on there, and it's actually currently fermenting in the bucket right there. And if you look real closely on the airlock, you can see all the sanitizer is actually pushed into this side. Oh, there it goes, just bubbled. So you can see it's actively fermenting already. So the only problem that I ran into that is my original gravity was quite a bit lower than I expected it to be. So I took my grain mill, and it was actually separated. Those grinders down the bottom that you can see were actually separated a little bit farther than they probably should be. So I shrunk them down to hopefully get a little bit finer grind out of them. And I'm hoping that'll release a little bit more sugar out of them in this batch. So I'm going to let this cleaning fluid go through and clean out everything for about 20 minutes, half an hour or so. And then we'll jump into brewing. So it's still cleaning, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because I actually need to grind up the Pilsner malt and the flaked rice that I got. And I'm going to see how this works out of the additional settings, or the adjusted settings on the grinder. So here's my mixture. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pour it in here. There we go. Then I'm going to get my drill. I'm going to hook it up on the side here. Okay, so I have my drill hooked up to my grinder. And, ooh, that takes a little more torque to it. Let's see if I can do this without making a mess. So you can see it's going to be a little bit loud, but I'm going to show you what comes out of the grill. So my production assistant and video editor, my son, just came over and helped me with that, because if you notice, the camera was kind of floating and I was holding on to the grain mill and the drill at the same time. So I don't have 3 arms. So that worked out. And this is what it produced. It's definitely finer than it was before. So I'm hoping with this brew, I should be closer to the original gravity than I was in the previous beer. And when I say I was off, it was supposed to be an original gravity of 1.052, and I was 1.024, which for anybody who's not familiar with brewing probably doesn't sound like a big change, but anybody who understands the original gravity and then the final gravity determines the alcohol percentage. If I hit the mark on the final gravity, the batch I did yesterday is going to come out at about 1.2% alcohol, which is really low. But I'm looking for the flavor profile to start with, and then I can slowly work on trying to crack out the grain, or crack up the grain even more. So brew day has officially started. We're about an hour after getting started, which making sure everything is sanitized and clean is key. So my mash temperature is 149.7, so I actually put it up to about 150 to start up with. And you can see everything is cleaned out. It's heating up. And I have all my hoses hooked up, ready to go to my pump. And for this batch, we're actually going to do an American light lager. I'm still searching in on a recipe on this one. This one's actually really simple. For a 2.5 gallon batch is 3 pounds, 4 ounces of a Pilsner malt, and then 9.5 ounces of flaked rice. And that's it. It's a 60-minute mash, actually 70-minute. And then we'll add some more water and we'll sparge out with about 10 minutes left. So I will be back when the water's at temperature and we throw all the grain in. Okay, so I have the water up. It's actually a little warm, but it's set at 149.7, and it'll finish up and then cool down. And I'm going to dump my grain in. Okay, put all my grain in. And now I'm gonna go ahead and stir it in. I can already start to tell this is a lot finer. So I think this is gonna work much better. Getting little sugars out of the grain. Okay. So now I'm just gonna, sorry about that, if that was a little loud in your ears. I'm going to just turn the pump on to start to circulate. I start my mash timer. All right, so now I hold 149.7 for 70 minutes. Put that all in, and now it's counting down. So this is only the second batch I've done with Brewfather. It's definitely a very helpful application. I would encourage anybody who's doing any kind of serious home brewing at home to take a look at it. They actually run a month free on the premium. So far, I'm definitely going to be paying for the premium. It helps keep track of timing. It gives you an alarm because, you know, here I've got 60 minutes to my next step. So that way it kind of helps keep me on track and aware, and it keeps track of all your batches automatically for you. And it's also got a great recipe library to pull from. So I'm not sponsored by them, hopefully, yet, but probably never will. But I would just encourage you, if you're into brewing at all, go ahead and use it. And here's what it looks like. So this is just a little bit of recirculation. Just keeps it fresh. And if you look at the color in there, it's already picking up some of the sugars. So here's a quick update. We are about 37 minutes left in the mash. I dropped the temperature down to about 145. And this is what it looks like. Going along pretty well. I just stirred it. And one of the things that I really enjoy about brewing beer is the problem solving that comes along with it. So with doing a lager, you actually need to ferment at a cooler temperature, and I don't have a big refrigeration unit where I can store a keg or anything like that. So for Christmas, my wife got me a small batch brewing kit, and it came with this little fermenter, this glass fermenter. And all in all, it's about 17 inches tall with the airlock. So I actually just swapped out the fridge. I had this one sitting up in the garage, and this way I can actually go through, and I was able to remove a couple of the shelves to go give me, and I still have my hops and yeast and everything up there. And I have a little thermometer, so it shows me what the right temperature is. But this way I'm going to be able to go through and lager the beer at about 50 degrees for a couple of days. Let me take a look at the exact fermentation process. So 4 days at 50 degrees, then you go up to 55 for one, 62 for one, 66 for one, and then I cold crash it to 33.8, and I leave it at that way for 7 more days, which I actually have my kegerator set at about 34, 35 degrees. So I think that's probably about as close to 33 as I'm going to get. So once I get through those first 7 days, I will just throw that fermenter in the kegerator and let it sit for 7 days. So let's see how it goes. And this is how I'm sparging. So I have the temperature set to 167. I have a bucket of as hot water as I can possibly get. And I actually just have the pickup that's normally at the bottom of my brew bucket in there. And I'm just watching the gallon because I need to put watching the side here, because I need to put 1.5 gallons in. So I heated up 2.5 gallons total. Then I just have it running through back up to the sprinkler top, just like I had it when I was going through the mash. And I'm just slowly moving it around to rinse out the grain and get as much of the sugars and stuff out of there as possible. So the mash and the mash out are complete. I'm currently heating up to 215 from a temperature standpoint to start the boil. I have the pump on, rotating around, going into the whirlpool just to keep it swirling so it stays that way. Once it gets to 215, I'm actually going to switch it over to a constant power just so it keeps a nice steady rolling boil. I've got about 4 minutes left in the boil. I'm holding about 214. I'm playing around with the power. I dropped it down to 55. And if I come in, if you can see, it's still holding a really good boil. So hopefully that will not burn off as much water. But you can see my timer. I added the sugar. We got about 3 minutes left. And then I'm going to try to drop it as low as possible. The recipe calls for dropping it down to about 50 degrees, which I just can't get with tap water in my plate chiller. So I'm going to go as low as I possibly can, and then throw it in the fermenter and drop it in the fridge. I have the fridge holding, let's see, about 47 degrees right now, so I gotta still turn that up a little bit more. But we're definitely making progress. So brewing beer takes a lot of time. This batch is going to be pushing almost 3 hours. And a couple of my friends asked me how I pass the time. Here's how I pass the time. I listen to some really good music. Today I'm in an AC/DC, or for my friends in Australia, Akadaka. But that's how I pass the time. I listen to music, have a beer, and make sure everything keeps on trucking. All right, so I am now crashing the temperature. So it was about 214. You see it's dropping quite rapidly right now. It slows down as it gets closer to the temperature of the tap water. But just to show everybody, I have it coming out, going to the pump, coming into the manifold, going into my plate chiller. And you can actually see right now coming out of the plate chiller, we're pushing about 80 degrees coming out of the plate chiller. So you see that's a bit of a gap between 153 at the temperature probe, and it's actually dropping just as we're watching it. So you can see it produces quite a bit of water to come out. This is full bore hose cold water coming out. One of the things that I've been thinking about is trying to figure out how do I make as little impact to the environment as possible. And one of the things that I'm looking at is actually doing either a fridge chiller or a glycol recirculating pump. That way I'm not running all this additional water to go through as a byproduct. It's just something I kind of care about and trying to figure out how to reduce the environmental impact. If anybody has any ideas on how to reduce the waste products that are created from here, let me know. For example, I actually just took the spent grain down to my neighbor who has chickens, and the chickens love it. So I dropped off about 5 pounds of spent grain between my brew yesterday and today, and I got 18 all-natural eggs. So that was pretty cool. Let me know if anybody else has any other ideas on how to reduce the environmental impact on water and other things like that with brewing. So you may have picked up on the whole Akadaka reference. I was actually in Vegas last week with a coworker of mine, Claire, and we got talking about the differences between Australia and US, and we got talking about music, and she was like, yeah, it's not AC/DC, it's Akadaka. So shout out to Claire for that obscure reference. All right, so I was able to get it down to about 58 degrees. And I got it transferred into my little mini fermenter, which fits perfectly in the fridge here. So that should drop it down the last little bit to 50 degrees. And a little trick I learned on the internet. Go through, put masking tape on there, and you can write all the information. So you can see day 1 through 4, 50. Day 5, 55. Day 6, 62. Day 7, 66. Then I crash it to 33. Just a little trick. That way you have your entire brewing, at least at this point, it's the fermenting schedule, ready to go. And we will see how this rolls out. So I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up, throw this in the fridge, and I will see you all at the next step. Make sure to be kind.